Story Corner, presented by Jennifer. The Cat Who. Book 1, The Cat Who Could Read Backwards. Chapter 8, Part 1. Okay, just so you guys are aware, this is a story that obviously is continuation. If you haven't seen the first few videos for The Cat Who Could Read Backwards, I suggest you go and view those now, as this is a continuation of that story. When Qwuilleran and Odd Bernson drove away from the Lambert house, they shivered in silence until the heater in Odd's car gave out the first promising puff. Then Odd said, "The Lamberts seem to be doing all right at the art racket. Wish I could live like that. I bet that sofa's worth $1,000. Who was that big bruiser?" "Butchie Bolson. Teaches sculpture at Henneman School of Fine Arts. She really thought she was running the show. And enjoying it, too." Qwuilleran agreed. "Butchie doesn't strike me as being exactly grief-stricken over the loss of Earl Lambert. I wonder where she fits into the picture. Friend of the family, I suppose." "If you ask me," said Odd, "I don't think that doll Zoe was taking it too hard either." "She's a calm, intelligent woman," Qwuilleran said. "Even if she is a doll, she's not the type to collapse. If my wife ever finds me lying in a pool of blood, I want her to collapse and collapse good. I don't want her running home and fixing her lipstick and putting on a sharp outfit to receive callers. Imagine a dame not remembering whether she telephoned her husband or not, and not remembering whether the gallery door was locked. It was the shock. It leaves blanks in the memory. She'll remember tomorrow. Or the next day. What do you think of the portrait she painted of her husband?" "Perfect. He's a cold fish. I couldn't have taken a photograph that was any better." Qwuilleran said, "I used to think these were modern artists painting drips and blots because they couldn't draw. But now I'm not so sure. Zoe is really talented." "If she's so talented, why does she waste her time painting that modern garbage?" "Probably because it sells. By the way, I'd like to meet our police reporter. Lodge Kendall? Haven't you met him yet? He's over at the press club just about every day for lunch. I'd like to have a talk with him. Want me to line it up for tomorrow? I'd said. Okay. Where are you headed now? Back to the lab. If it isn't out of your way, would you drop me at my apartment? No sweat. Qwuilleran looked at his wristwatch in the glow of the instrument panel. It's 10:30, he said, and I forgot to feed the cat. Said Odd. I told you Monty would want you for a cat sitter. A few minutes later, when he had turned the car into Millennium Place, he said, Doesn't this neighborhood scare the heck out of you? The characters you see on the streets. They don't bother me, said Qwuilleran. You wouldn't get me to live here. I'm a coward. A folded newspaper lay on the porch of number 26. Qwuilleran picked it up and unlocked the front door and closed it quickly behind him, glad to get out of the cold. He rattled the door handle to make sure it was locked again, as Mount Clemens had warned him to do. Using a second key, he unlocked the inner vestibule door, and that's when he recoiled back in fright. Out of the darkness came a wild scream. Qwuilleran's mind went blank. The hairs on his mustache stood on end. His heart pounded. Instinctively, he gripped the newspaper like a club. Then he realized the source of the scream. Koko was waiting for him. Koko was scolding him. Koko was hungry. Koko was furious. Qwuilleran leaned against the door jamb and gasped. He loosened his tie. Never do that again, he told the cat. Koko was sitting on the table that was supported by golden lions, and he retorted with a torrent of abuse. All right, Qwuilleran yelled at him. I apologize. I forgot. That's all. Important business downtown. Koko continued his tirade. Wait till I take my coat off, will you? Once Qwuilleran started upstairs, the torment ceased. The cat bounded ahead and led him into Mount Clemens' apartment, which was in darkness. Qwuilleran groped for a light switch. This delay irritated Koko, who commenced another vocal demonstration. Now the piercing cries had gravelly throated undertones, signifying menace. I'm coming, said Qwuilleran, following the cat down the long hallway to the kitchen. Koko led him directly to the refrigerator, where there was a chunk of beef waiting in a glass tray. It looked like a whole tenderloin. Qwuilleran put the meat on a built-in butcher's block and hunted for a sharp knife. Where does he keep his knives? He said, pulling open one drawer after another. Koko leapt lightly to the adjoining counter and nosed a knife rack, where 5 handsome blades hung pointed downward on a magnetized bar. Thanks, Quill said. He started to carve the beef, marveling at the quality of the cutlery. Real chef's knives. They made meat cutting a pleasure. How did Mount Clemens say to cut the beef? The size of a kidney bean or the size of a navy bean? And how about the broth? He said to warm it in broth. Where was the broth? The cat was sitting on the counter, supervising every move with what appeared to be an impatient scowl. Qwuilleran said, How about eating it raw, old man, since it's so late? Koko gargled in a low note in his throat, which Qwuilleran assumed was adequate. In the cupboard he found a plate, white porcelain with a wide gold band. He arranged the meat on it attractively, he thought, and placed it on the floor alongside a ceramic water bowl decorated with the word cat in 3 languages. Koko jumped to the floor with a grunt and walked to the plate and examined the beef. Then he looked up at Quill with incredibly displayed in the tilt of his head. tilt of his ears. "Go ahead, eat," said Qwuilleran. "Enjoy it in good health." Koko lowered his head once more. He sniffed. He touched the beef with his paw and gave a perspective shudder. He shook his paw fastidiously and walked away. His tail pointed stiffly towards the North Star. Later, after Qwuilleran had found some thin gravy in the refrigerator and prepared the meal properly, Koko consented to dine. The newsman relayed the experience at the press club the following noon when he had lunch with Art Riker and Logan Kendall. "But this morning I acquitted myself admirably," said Qwuilleran. "Koko got me up at 6:30 by yelling outside my door, and I went up and prepared breakfast to his satisfaction. I think he's going to let me keep the job until Mount Clemens comes home." The police reporter was young, tense, earnest, literal, and unsmiling. He said, "Do you mean to say you let a cat boss you around?" "Actually, I feel sorry for him. Poor little rich cat. Nothing but tenderloins and pâté de la maison. I wish I could catch him a mouse." Art explained to Kendall, "You see, this is a Siamese, descended from an Egyptian god. It's not only communicates and runs the show, it reads newspaper headlines. A cat that can read is obviously superior to a newsman who can't catch mice." Qwuilleran said, "He flies, too. When he wants to get to the top of an 8-foot bookcase, he just puts his ears back and zooms up like a jet. No wings. He's got some kind of aerodynamic principle that ordinary cats don't have." Kendall regarded the two older men with wonder and suspicion. "After Koko got me up at 6:30, said Qwuilleran, "I started thinking about the Lambert murder. Any developments, Logan?" "Nothing released this morning." "Have they reached any conclusions about the vandalism?" "Not that I've heard." "Well, I observed something last night that looks interesting. All 4 items that were damaged were portrayals of the female figure, more or less unclothed. Did the police notice that?" "I don't know," said the police reporter. "I'll mention it at headquarters." "It isn't easy to spot. The stuff is pretty abstract, and a casual glance wouldn't tell anything." "Then the vandal must have been someone who digs modern art," said Kendall. "Some kind of nut who hated his mother." "That narrows it down," said Art. Qwuilleran was in his element, on the fringes of the police beat where he had learned the newspaper craft. His face had a glow. Even his mustache looked happy. 3 corned beef sandwiches came to the table with a plastic squeeze bottle, and the newsman concentrated on applying mustard, each in his own fashion. Art squirted it on the rye bread in concentric circles. Kendall laminized a precise zigzag, and Qwuilleran squeezed out a reckless abstraction. After a while, Kendall said to him, "Know much about Lambert?" "I just met him once. He was sort of a stuffed shirt." "What was the gallery successful?" "Hard to say. It was sumptuously furnished, but that doesn't prove anything. Some of the paintings were price tagged in 5 figures, although I wouldn't give you 5 cents for them. I imagine investors were buying this kind of art. That's why Lambert set up shop in the financial district." "Maybe some sucker thought he'd been taken and gotten into a fatal argument with the dealer." "That doesn't fit with the nature of the vandalism." Art said, "Do you think the choice of weapons indicated anything?" "It was a chisel from the workbench," said Kendall. Either the killer seized on that and a moment of passion, or he knew in advance it would be there for the purpose. Who was employed in the workroom? I don't think anyone was employed, said Qwuilleran. I suspect Lambert made the frames himself, in spite of the fancy front he put on for customers. When I was there, I noticed definite evidence of work in progress, but no workman. And when I asked who made the frames, he gave me an evasive answer. Then I noticed that his hands were grimy, stained and battered, as if he did manual labor. Then maybe the gallery wasn't too successful and he was cutting corners. On the other hand, he was living in a good neighborhood, and his house appeared to be furnished expensively. Kendall said, I wonder if Lambert admitted the killer to the premises after hours, or did the killer let himself in the back way, with a key? I'm sure it was someone Lambert knew, Qwuilleran said, and I think the evidence of the struggle was rigged after the murder. How do you figure that? From the position of the body. Lambert seemed to have gone down between his swivel chair and his desk, as if he had been sitting there when the murderer took him by surprise. He wouldn't engage in a brawl and then go and sit at his desk waiting to be polished off. Well, let's the police solve it, said Arch. We've got work to do. As the men left the lunch table, the bartender beckoned to Quill. I read about Lambert